Have you ever felt like there's a part of you don't really understand? Like, you're not sure who you really are anymore? I've been there too. Let me share something with you. Maybe it'll help you see things a little clearer. You know that strange feeling when someone's words are warm, but something underneath just doesn't sit right? Like they're smiling at you, joking around, but you walk away feeling smaller, unseen, like the laughter cost you something. I used to brush that off. I tell myself I was being too sensitive, overthinking, misreading the vibe. But now, I think those moments were my intuition trying to protect me, whispering, this isn't safe. There was this friend I had for years. Let's call him Aaron. To anyone else, he seemed like the perfect companion. Witty, easy to talk to, the kind of guy who could light up a room with sarcasm and charm. We'd been through some deep stuff together, and I believed he had my back. But over time, a pattern started to form. A pattern that, honestly, I didn't want to admit. Whenever I'd share something personal, maybe a little victory, a story that meant something to me, he'd respond with a joke. Not the kind that brings people closer, but the kind that twists the knife just enough to leave a mark. I'd laugh along, tell myself it was harmless, but deep down, I'd feel the sting. I'd feel smaller. I remember one evening, I told him I'd finally started therapy. It had taken me months to work up the courage, and I felt proud, hopeful even. He looked at me, raised an eyebrow, and said, wow, you? Therapy? Should I be worried? Then he laughed, like it was all in good fun. But the laughter felt like a dismissal, like my vulnerability was entertainment. After that, I started to notice more. How he'd subtly undercut my ideas, how his compliments always had a shadow attached. That's impressive for you. You actually pulled it off? I'm surprised. And each time, I'd smile through it, pretending I didn't feel the ground shift a little beneath me. But here's the thing. Words are only part of the story. Our bodies speak, too. And his body, the way his eyes narrowed when I talked about something good, the way his shoulders tensed when others praised me, it told a different truth. A deeper one, one he didn't have to say out loud. It took me a long time to realize what was happening. That the sarcasm wasn't just humor. That the little digs weren't innocent. That beneath the surface, there was something unresolved in him. Something that made it hard for him to be genuinely happy for someone else. Carl Jung talked about the shadow, those parts of ourselves we reject and try to hide, but that always find a way to leak out. I think Aaron had a lot of shadows. Maybe feelings of not being good enough, or fears he couldn't name. And when he saw someone else, even someone he cared about, stepping into light, it triggered something dark in him. Something that said, if they rise, I fall. I don't think he hated me. Not consciously. But I do think part of him resented what I represented. Someone trying to grow, to heal, to move forward. And that part couldn't help but try to pull me back down. It's a painful thing to admit, especially when it's someone close to you. But I had to face it, not to judge him, but to protect myself. Because staying in that dynamic meant slowly shrinking, dimming my own light so it wouldn't upset him, laughing off cuts like they were love taps. And isn't that the saddest thing? How we learn to accept little hurts from people who say they care. How we train ourselves to endure instead of question, to rationalize instead of feel. I had to unlearn that. I had to start trusting my own emotional responses, even the quiet, vague ones that whispered something's off. I had to stop gaslighting myself in the name of being understanding. Because understanding someone doesn't mean you should stay close to them, especially when closeness starts to cost you pieces of yourself. Eventually, I pulled back from Aaron, not with anger or blame, just distance. And as space grew between us, I started to feel something I hadn't in a long time. Peace. The kind of peace that comes from no longer needing to guard your joy. From knowing your words won't be turned against you. From not bracing for the next disguised insult. There's grief in that kind of letting go, but also liberation. And it taught me something I carry with me now, a kind of compass. If someone's presence makes me question my worth, if their jokes leave me doubting my value, that's not love. That's shadow work leaking into my light. And I won't apologize for stepping out of that shadow anymore. There's something even harder to face than sarcasm or irony. It's the kind of sabotage that doesn't scream, but quietly chips away at you when you're not looking. I didn't want to believe it at first. The idea that someone close to me could hurt me not with fists or fights, but with silence, with forgetfulness, with little moments of oops, I didn't mean to. But patterns don't lie. And once you start seeing them, you can't unsee them. I remember when I was trying to start a small project, something that meant a lot to me. It wasn't huge, but it was mine. A little creative thing I was building in the evenings, just to feel like I had some direction again. I told a friend, let's call her Mia, and she seemed excited. She even offered to help with a few things. I was grateful. I trusted her. But then came the little mistakes. She forgot to email the contact. I asked her to. No big deal, I thought. Life's busy. Then she gave me advice, confidently, almost forcefully, that turned out to be completely wrong. It set me back by weeks. Again, she apologized. I swear, I thought that was how it worked, she said wide-eyed. And I nodded, accepted it. But it kept happening. A reminder she was supposed to send. A conversation she promised to have. Every time it slipped through the cracks. And, somehow, every time it hurt me more than it hurt her. That's when something in my gut started to twist. I went back through her history, and suddenly I saw it. Times she'd forgotten to invite me to important things. Moments where she'd downplayed an opportunity that ended up being huge. A pattern of small interferences that always came off as unintentional, but always pushed me off track. Carl Jung once said that when people are unable to confront their own failures, they unconsciously project the discomfort onto others. And I think that's what was happening with Mia. She wasn't consciously trying to ruin anything. But deep down, maybe my little steps forward reminded her of places she felt stuck. And instead of facing that pain, her mind found ways to keep me in place. Subtly, quietly, almost kindly. Sabotage doesn't always look like betrayal. Sometimes it wears the mask of a friend with good intentions. That's what makes it so hard to name, so hard to confront. I kept asking myself, is it really that bad? Maybe I'm just being too sensitive again. But something inside me had changed. I wasn't just looking at isolated mistakes anymore. I was seeing a system, a rhythm, and it was slowly draining me of trust, of confidence, of joy. It's scary to realize that someone you care about might benefit from your stagnation. Not in a cruel, cartoonish way, but in a deeply human one. Because if you grow, it might force them to face all the places they haven't. And if they're not ready for that, they might try, without even knowing it, to hold you in place. When I finally brought it up to Mia, I did it gently. I didn't accuse. I just said, I've noticed that when I really need something to move forward, things seem to fall through when I count on you. I'm not sure why, but it's starting to feel like a pattern. She got defensive, laughed it off, said I was overanalyzing. That hurt, but it also confirmed what I needed to know. So I stopped depending on her. I stopped sharing certain things. I started protecting the spaces that mattered most to me. It felt lonely at first, like closing a door that had been open for years, but also felt clean, like I was reclaiming something that had been quietly slipping away. People who sabotage you softly aren't always bad people. Sometimes they're just afraid. Afraid that your rise will make them feel small. Afraid that your success will leave them behind. And that fear turns into forgetfulness, into misdirection, into bad advice disguised as help. But that doesn't mean you have to accept it. You don't owe anyone your stillness. You don't have to dim just because someone else hasn't found their own light. I've learned to trust patterns more than promises. Words can lie. Excuses can be endless. But behavior repeats. And when it does, it teaches you everything you need to know, not just about others, but about what you're willing to tolerate. If you feel like you're being subtly held back, pay attention. If someone's mistakes always cost you more than them, take a step back. You're allowed to protect your path, even from those who smile while they block it. And if you've ever been that person, the one who, in moments of fear, has downplayed someone else's growth, don't shame yourself. Just own it, heal it, and don't let it control you again. We've all been there in one way or another. The real question is, what do we choose now? Growth or grip? Envy or encouragement? Because every time someone close to us rises, we're offered a mirror. Not a reason to pull them down, but a reason to rise too. You ever share something you're proud of, something that took real effort, and the person across from you immediately tries to top it? Or worse, shrugs it off, like it's no big deal. At first, I thought I was just being touchy. I mean, everyone wants to talk about themselves, right? But after a while, it started to wear on me. Like my joy was being constantly measured, weighed, and subtly dismissed. There was someone in my life, I'll call him Jake, who did this all the time. If I said I'd finally gotten a raise at work, he'd go, "Nice. I just got offered something bigger too, actually." If I shared that I'd run a 10K, he'd say, "You should try a marathon. That's what I'm training for." It didn't matter what the topic was. My wins always had to be followed by his. Only his were louder, better, faster. It's not that I didn't want him to succeed. I did. I was always cheering him on. But it felt like the space between us was turning into a scoreboard. Every time I opened my heart, he responded like it was a competition. And slowly, I started holding back. I stopped sharing the things I was proud of. Not because they weren't worthy, but because I knew they'd get minimized or overshadowed. I didn't realize at the time, but I was shrinking myself to make him feel big enough. Jung talked about this dynamic too, the projection of our own insecurities onto others. People who feel lacking often react to someone else's success not with celebration, but with silent discomfort. And that discomfort find a voice in comparison, in one-upping, in quiet resentment. It wasn't always direct with Jake. Sometimes it came in sideways comments. Like when I mentioned I'd started meditating regularly, he said, "That's cool, but I've been doing that for years. You're just getting into it." Or if I talked about a book that moved me, he'd roll his eyes. "That one? It's kind of basic." Every time, it chipped away a little more. Not just at my joy, but at my sense of safety. Because when someone you care about turns every moment into a mirror, not to reflect, but to compete, you start questioning your place in the relationship. It hurt, not because I needed his validation, but because I thought we were on the same team. Turns out we weren't. We were running two very different races, and in his, I wasn't allowed to win. That realization stung, but also freed me. I started asking myself, why did I stay in this dynamic for so long? And the answer was painful, but honest. Part of me believed I had to earn his acceptance. That if I could prove my value, he'd finally just be proud of me. But that's the trap of ego-driven relationships. You keep giving, hoping that one day it'll be enough. That you'll be enough. But you already are. I had to unlearn the habit of measuring my worth by how well it landed in someone else's insecure hands. I also had to reckon with my own moments of comparison. Times I'd been on the other side, quietly resenting someone else's light because I felt lost in my own shadow. And I realized how universal this is. How human. We all want to feel seen, valued, important. But when we haven't done our own healing, someone else's success feels like a threat instead of an invitation. And that's where quiet competition is born, not out of malice, but out of unspoken pain. The shift happened when I stopped waiting for Jake to celebrate me. When I started surrounding myself with people who didn't just clap when I won, they meant it. People who didn't need to dim my light to feel secure in their own. And the more I leaned into those relationships, the more I realized love doesn't compete. It expands. It uplifts. It doesn't say me too. It says, "I'm so proud of you." I don't hate Jake. I don't even blame him. I just don't place my joy in his hands anymore. That's mine to hold, mine to protect, and yours too. So if you ever find yourself walking away from conversation feeling a little smaller, check in with your gut. If someone always needs to be one step ahead, maybe they're too afraid of being left behind. And that's not your burden to carry. You deserve to be around people who see your joy and reflect it back tenfold. Who hear your growth and feel inspired, not threatened. Who know that in love, real love, there's no race, no scoreboard, no need to prove anything. Just presence, just peace, just the quiet, powerful freedom of being exactly who you are without apology. You know what's wild? Sometimes the people who say they care the most disappear when you actually need them. I don't mean physically vanish. I mean emotionally check out. Like they're there when it's convenient, when everything's light and easy, but when things get heavy. Silence. Excuses. A blank space where support should be. There was someone like that in my life. Let's call her Claire. She was always around when things were fine. Always had something nice to say. Always wanted to catch up, but only when it was comfortable for her. I didn't notice at first, because on the surface, she seemed genuinely interested. She asked how I was doing. She smiled. She nodded. She said the right things. But when I hit a rough patch, really hit it, she faded. I remember one time I was going through something deeply personal. I won't get into the details, but I needed someone, not to fix anything, just to sit with me, to hold space, to say, I see you. I'm here. So I reached out to Claire, sent a simple message. Hey, I'm going through a hard time. Can we talk? She replied 2 days later with, so sorry, it's been crazy busy. Hope you're okay. And that was it. It felt like getting hit with a cold wind. Like my vulnerability had been met with a shrug. After that, I noticed more. Times I'd share something meaningful, and she'd brush it off, or change the subject, or offer some shallow platitude, and then steer the conversation back to herself. At first, I told myself I was asking too much. That people have lives, stress, things going on. And that's true, but it doesn't explain the absence, the disinterest, the hollowness of her care. The truth is, some people like the idea of being close, but not the responsibility of it. They enjoy the warmth of connection when it doesn't cost them anything. But when real intimacy requires presence, depth, empathy, they vanish. And it hurts, because emotional abandonment doesn't always come from enemies. Sometimes, it comes from the ones who said they'd always be there. The ones who said, I've got you, and then disappeared the moment your world got messy. Carl Jung spoke of emotional dissociation, a defense mechanism where people disconnect from feelings they don't know how to handle. And I think that's what was happening with Claire. My pain made her uncomfortable, maybe because it reminded her of her own, and instead of facing it, she retreated behind polite words and distant smiles. It took me a while to understand that, and longer to accept it. But here's what I learned. Real connection shows up. It's not always perfect or eloquent or heroic. Sometimes it's just someone sitting with you in silence. Someone texting back, I don't know what to say, but I'm here. That's love. That's presence. That's real. The people who ghost your hard times but celebrate your easy ones, that's not love. That's convenience. And it's okay to mourn that. To feel the sting of realizing someone was only ever half in. That the closeness you thought you had was built on something fragile and shallow. But don't let that harden you. Don't let it make you stop reaching out. What I started doing was paying more attention to consistency than charm. To who actually shows up when it matters. To who listens without fixing. To who celebrates without jealousy. It narrowed my circle, but made it so much more sacred. And if you've been Claire at some point, if someone reached for you and you didn't know how to hold them, forgive yourself. Just be honest about it. We're all learning how to love better, deeper, more bravely. The key is not pretending, not ghosting, not hiding behind busyness. The world is full of people drowning quietly. What they need isn't a rescue, just company in the water. Just someone who says, I see you. I'm not turning away. So if you've ever felt alone in a crowd of people who care, you're not crazy. You're not needy. You're just noticing something real. And you deserve better. You deserve friends who don't disappear when your soul is aching. Who hold space for your tears, not just your laughter. You don't have to beg for presence. You don't have to earn support. The people meant to walk with you through the hard stuff, they won't flinch. They won't ghost. They'll stay. And if you haven't found them yet, don't settle for less. The world has enough noise. What we need is more quiet, honest presence. And when you find that, or become that, everything changes. There's a kind of manipulation that's so subtle, so well-dressed, that it almost looks like love. You don't notice it at first. It comes wrapped in concern, sprinkled with advice, disguised as care. But over time, it starts to feel like you're walking with someone else's hands on your shoulders, gently steering you away from yourself. I didn't recognize it until I was deep in it. Let me tell you about that. There was someone in my life, I'll call her Laura. She wasn't cruel. She never raised her voice. In fact, she was one of the most caring people I knew. Always asking questions, always checking in, always offering her opinion. And at first, it felt comforting, like someone was really looking out for me. But over time, something shifted. Anytime I made a decision she didn't fully agree with, she questioned me. Not harshly, just subtly. Are you sure that's the right move? That seems risky, don't you think? I mean, it's your life, but I just worry. She said she was worried a lot. So much that I started to worry too. I'd second guess myself constantly. If I made a choice without consulting her, I'd feel uneasy, like I had to explain or justify it. And when things went wrong, as life naturally does, she'd say, I didn't want to say anything, but I had a feeling this wouldn't work out. It felt like her approval was the air I breathed, and without it, I was gasping. That's when I realized it wasn't care, it was control. Carl Jung said that the desire to control others often comes from our own internal fears, our struggle to manage the chaos inside. And I think that was true for Laura. She needed to feel like the voice of reason, the stable one, the advisor. And if I stepped outside of that, it threatened the balance she had built, not just in our relationship, but in her own sense of worth. The more I grew, the more tension I felt. Like any step I took toward independence was seen as rebellion. Any choice I made without her input was interpreted as rejection. But here's the truth I've come to. Real love doesn't sound like I know what's best for you. It sounds like I believe you know what's best for you. When someone constantly questions your instincts, it slowly erodes your trust in yourself. And when you start relying on their voice more than your own, you lose your center. I started noticing how often I edited myself around her. I'd soften my opinions. I'd hide my excitement until I knew how she'd react. I became careful. And careful is a terrible way to live when it comes from fear, not respect. So I began to pull back, gently at first. I started making decisions without running them by her. I shared less. I listened more to my own gut. And that's when the shift became undeniable. She got colder. Not outwardly mean, just distant, detached. Like my independence was an insult. She'd say things like, I don't know what's going on with you lately, even though I was doing better than ever. Because for her, better meant compliant. Letting go of that dynamic wasn't easy. Part of me still wanted her approval, still wanted her to say, I'm proud of you. But I realized I'd been trying to earn the kind of love that required me to be small, doubtful, and obedient. And that's not love. That's dependency. Since then, I've relearned how to listen to myself. It's not always loud or clear. Sometimes it's just a whisper, a sense of ease or unease. But it's mine, and I honor it now. If someone in your life is constantly undermining your choices, even if they do it sweetly, even if they say it's out of love, pause. Ask yourself, do I feel more confident after talking to them, or more uncertain? That question alone can change everything. You deserve relationships where your voice is respected, not overwritten. Where advice isn't a tool to control, but a gift freely given and just as freely declined. Where love doesn't come with strings tied around your freedom. And if you've been on the other side, if you try to control someone out of fear, just breathe. We've all been there in some form. The healing begins with awareness, with loosening your grip, with trusting that people can grow, fall, rise, and choose without needing your constant guidance. The most loving thing we can do for each other sometimes is step back, hold space, and say, I trust you, even when I'm scared, even when I wouldn't do it that way. That's real care. That's love with open hands. And that's the kind of love I'm choosing now. There's a different kind of pain, one that doesn't come from direct conflict, but from the slow realization that someone is wounding you in places they pretend to protect. You know the type of person I'm talking about. The ones who act like friends in front of you, but plant quiet poison when your back is turned. Gossip, doubt, subtle shade, not in explosions, but in whispers. It happened to me, and honestly, I didn't want to believe it first. I thought I was imagining it. I mean, how could someone so close, someone I trusted, speak about me like that? But the signs were there. It started small, people treating me differently for no reason I could understand. A sudden distance. Conversations cut short. People I used to laugh with now giving me half smiles, looking past me in group settings. At first, I blamed myself. Maybe I said something wrong. Maybe I was too distant. Too much. Not enough. But then someone slipped. They mentioned something that had been said. Something personal, twisted just enough to be damaging. And I knew exactly where it came from. I had told only one person. Her name was Lena. At the time, she was one of the people I held closest. We'd shared secrets, long nights of vulnerable conversations. I thought we had each other's backs. But looking back, I realized she often asked questions that felt loaded. She'd say things like, "Don't you think people sometimes see you as too intense?" Or, "I'm just curious, do you ever worry about coming across as self-righteous?" Things that sounded like concern, but hit like knives. Carl Jung said that what people can't face in themselves, they often project onto others. And I think that's what was happening. Lena had her own insecurities, fears, maybe even resentment she couldn't name. So instead of confronting them, she transferred them onto me, quietly undermining my image in rooms I wasn't in. That kind of betrayal is deeply confusing because it doesn't wear a villain's face. It wears a familiar one. It smiles. It hugs you. And then it whispers something behind closed doors that makes the people around you question your character. It made me question myself, too. But here's what I've learned. If someone's words about you and their energy toward you don't match, trust the dissonance. The body knows. The intuition knows. The ache in your chest when someone praises you with hollow eyes, that's your truth speaking. When I finally confronted Lena, gently, not accusing, just expressing what I'd felt, she denied everything. Smiled, acted confused, and maybe she wasn't even aware of what she'd done. Maybe the gossip had leaked through her like a crack in the mask. Maybe it was her own shadow trying to make sense of feelings she didn't know how to process. But I knew. I knew because of how I felt around her after. I no longer trusted her silence. I no longer believed her compliments. I could feel the difference between real and fake, even if I couldn't explain it in words. So I stepped away. No drama, no public fallout, just distance. And with that space came healing. I began to surround myself with people who didn't need to diminish me to feel secure. People who lifted me in public and in private. People who were the same when I left the room as when I was in it. If you're feeling like your name is being reshaped behind your back, pay attention to the shifts in energy, the sudden changes in how others treat you, the vague comments that feel like echoes of something you didn't hear firsthand. And if you're someone who has ever gossiped out of hurt, out of fear, out of jealousy, own it. That shadow only grows when it's denied. But when you face it, when you name it, you can choose differently. Words are powerful. They shape perception. They plant stories. They build or break trust. And when someone uses them to erode another person quietly, it says more about them than it ever will about you. Now, I hold my circle sacred. I don't need it to be large. Just honest. Just kind. Just real. So if you've been hurt this way by the soft betrayal of gossip, know this. Your truth is stronger than someone else's story about you. And you don't have to defend yourself in every room where your name is spoken. The people who really matter, they'll feel the difference. They'll know who you are. They'll listen to your energy louder than anyone's opinion. Let your integrity speak. Let your presence be your voice. And let the rest fall away. Have you ever shared something beautiful, a moment, an accomplishment, a quiet little joy, and been met with silence? Not hostility, not argument, just absence. Like the person you trusted to celebrate with you had suddenly become emotionally unavailable the moment your light began to shine. That silence? It cuts deeper than words. I remember it clearly. I worked hard on something, really hard. Put my heart into it. When it finally came together, I was proud. Nervous, but proud. And there was someone in my life, a close friend, someone I loved deeply, who I wanted to share it with. Let's call him Daniel. I sent him a message. Just a simple, excited note. "Hey, the project's live. I'd love for you to see it." No reply. A day passed. Then two. When he finally responded, it was a dry, "Oh yeah, I saw. Congrats." That was it. No questions, no enthusiasm, no warmth. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he was busy. Maybe he didn't realize how important it was to me. But deep down, I felt that hollow ache, the one you get when someone close to you pulls away right when you need them to lean in. And it wasn't the first time. I started looking back and realizing how often Daniel had gone quiet whenever things were going well for me. A promotion, a new relationship, a spark of confidence. Each time, his energy changed. Sometimes it was subtle, a change in tone, a quick subject switch. Sometimes it was more obvious, like canceling plans right after I'd shared good news. Carl Jung once said that the inability to rejoice in another's success is often a reflection of unresolved inner conflict. And I think that's what Daniel was wrestling with, his own feelings of stuckness, of disappointment. My growth reminded him of where he felt stagnant. And instead of being inspired, he became distant. It's easy to take that personally, to feel like you're being punished for shining, like your happiness is a burden to those around you. But here's the hard truth. Not everyone can handle your light. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because they haven't yet made peace with their own darkness. The first time I realized that, I cried. Not out of anger, but grief. I wanted to believe that love, true love, deep friendship, would always be celebratory. That the people closest to us would be our biggest fans. But sometimes they're not. Sometimes your joy triggers their pain. And that's not your fault. You don't have to dim your light to be loved. You don't have to downplay your joy to keep the peace. You don't have to shrink yourself so someone else can feel big enough to stay close. You're allowed to be proud. You're allowed to celebrate. You're allowed to feel joy out loud, even if it makes others uncomfortable. Because that joy, it's not arrogance. It's healing. It's growth. It's the result of everything you've overcome. It took me time, but I stopped hiding my wins. I stopped offering disclaimers before sharing good news. I stopped apologizing for being happy. And you know what happened? I found people who clapped. Loudly. Joyfully. Genuinely. People who didn't just tolerate my success. They honored it. People who believed that my light didn't dim theirs. It illuminated the room. And I realized that's what I deserve. That's what we all deserve. If you've ever felt the sting of that quiet resentment, if you've ever noticed someone's absence in your happiest moments, I want you to know you're not too much. You're not showing off. You're not wrong for growing. You're just surrounded by the wrong audience. So start noticing who celebrates you when there's nothing in it for them, who listens with sparkle in their eyes, who stays close when your life starts to change. These people, they're gold, and they're out there. And if you've been Daniel, if someone else's joy has made you feel less than, don't shame yourself. Just be honest about it. Ask what part of you still needs love, still feels behind, still aches to rise. That's your shadow asking to be seen. And healing begins the moment you stop pretending it's not there. Joy isn't meant to be hidden. It's meant to be shared, celebrated, echoed. So don't let someone's silence become your story. Don't mistake their distance for a sign that you're unworthy. You're not too bright, too bold, too happy. You're just beginning to glow. Let yourself shine. There's this strange moment. Not quite fear, not quite sadness. When you realize someone's words don't match their energy. They're smiling. They're saying all the right things. But something deep inside you whispers, this isn't real. You feel it in your gut, in the way your shoulders tense without explanation, in the way your chest tightens when they say, I'm happy for you. But their eyes don't smile. Their body leans away. Their voice dips ever so slightly at the end of the sentence. That's when I started learning to trust the space between words. There was someone in my life, we'll call her Elise. She was warm, charming, friendly. If you didn't look too closely, you'd think she was the kindest person in the world. And for a long time, I did. She never said anything cruel, never raised her voice, never gave me a reason to doubt her. Except I never felt safe around her. Whenever I shared something good, a new job, a small win, even just a moment of peace, she'd say the right things. Wow, that's great. You deserve it. But I'd feel cold. Not rejected, not openly. Just alone. Her eyes would flick away too quickly. Her voice would flatten. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. And I started to dread telling her anything real. Not because she'd criticize me, but because she'd pretend not to. That's the thing about passive resentment. It hides behind polite words. It doesn't attack, it withholds. It doesn't break you down, it lets you deflate slowly. Carl Jung once said that the unconscious always reveals itself, no matter how much we try to control it. And that's what I began to see in Elise. The unconscious leaking through her expressions, her posture, her silence. She didn't need to say anything out loud. Her body spoke volumes. It's a strange kind of grief, realizing someone doesn't celebrate your light, even if they act like they do. because it means every moment of vulnerability you shared with them, every joy you trusted them with, might have been quietly met with jealousy, discomfort, or disdain. I used to dismiss it, tell myself I was reading too much into things, that I was being paranoid, that I needed to give people the benefit of the doubt. But you know what I realized? Doubt is not the same as intuition. Doubt is loud, spinning, anxious. Intuition is quiet, heavy, certain, and my intuition had been speaking for a long time. It told me when the compliments felt hollow, when the conversations turned transactional, when Elise's body froze in moments where she should have leaned in. So I started listening. I stopped explaining away that inner voice. I stopped rationalizing behavior that didn't align with love. I began to take people at their energy, not just their words. Because words are easy, energy doesn't lie. The most important part of this wasn't distancing myself from Elise. It was reclaiming trust in myself. Trusting that I didn't need a reason to feel off. That I didn't need proof to honor what my body already knew. It was freeing, honestly, to stop seeking permission to protect my peace. To stop convincing myself to stay close to people who made me feel small, even if they never said a single harsh thing. And here's something that really shifted my perspective. Not everyone who smiles at you is for you. Some people are just uncomfortable with someone who's free, who glows, who has something they've buried in themselves. And that's not your burden to carry. It's not your job to fix or soften or stay small to make them feel safe. If you felt this, if someone's presence makes you feel like you're tiptoeing through a conversation, unsure if you're allowed to be joyful, pay attention. That discomfort is wisdom. And if you've been Elise, if you've watched someone else's joy and felt it twist something inside you, just be honest about it. That's a shadow asking to be seen. Not punished, not shamed, just seen, just understood. We all have those parts. The ones that feel left behind. The ones that ache when someone else seems to soar. But when we face them, when we bring them into the light, they stop needing to sabotage connection. They just become part of us, healed, not hidden. So now, when I feel that shift, when someone's words say one thing, but their energy says another, I don't argue with it. I don't force closeness. I don't betray myself for the sake of appearances. I just listen. I trust. I choose peace. Because I've learned, safety doesn't come from what people say. It comes from how they make you feel when you're most yourself. If this felt meaningful to you, it might mean something to someone else too. So hit like, leave a comment, or subscribe. That's how YouTube knows to share with others. Maybe together, we can help someone see things a little differently.